siento que está herido.
Dile que estoy bien.
Mírale las manitos, Funes.
¿Conveniente comentarnos?
Ah, sí.
Sí.
Mira.
Clara is washing dishes when she hears strange voices coming from the sink. Curious yet frightened, she turns the water on and off to investigate. Her husband, Juan, arrives home and shares a lighthearted story about a dog they hit, but Clara is too distracted by the sink to respond. When Juan asks about dinner, Clara tells him she heard voices warning her of danger. Juan tries to reassure her, but she insists the voices sound human. Later, they wake up to loud banging noises. Clara goes to the bathroom while Juan, annoyed, yells at their neighbor to stop making noise. Overcome with anger, the man rushes to his neighbor Walter's house to confront him. He rings the doorbell and shouts, but Walter doesn't answer. After a while, he returns home and sits on his bed, noticing his wife is taking longer than usual. Concerned, he checks on her, only to find her floating in midair, covered in bright red blood. The walls are painted red, and the floor smells of blood. The man is momentarily speechless, trying to understand the scene. He rushes to his wife Clara, but she dies from her injuries that night, leaving Juan heartbroken. Days later, Juan faces a panel of 3 well-dressed individuals, 2 older men and an elderly woman, after being arrested for his wife's murder. They claim to believe in his innocence and want to help. Dr. Maura Albrecht, known for her paranormal research, is accompanied by Dr. Rosenthal and Mr. John Omario, who have similar backgrounds. Dr. Albrecht shows Juan disturbing photos related to a similar case in the U.S. and asks him to recount the events surrounding Clara's death. After some thought, Juan mentions a child's accident he witnessed and recalls his unsettling neighbor, Walter, who remodels his house at odd hours. Dr. Albrecht recognizes Walter Carvajal's name, noting he has contacted her office several times. Meanwhile, Walter, anxious in his office, calls to explain his unexplainable experiences and seeks an appointment with Dr. Albrecht, but the secretary tells him to call back the next day. That night, Walter returns to his haunted home, struggling to sleep due to a strange presence, and finds his pills less effective against the visions and sounds. That night, Walter is terrified and barely sleeps. The next morning, he wakes up to find his apartment in disarray. He goes to his office and tries to call Dr. Albrecht's secretary again, but she tells him the doctor reviews evidence personally before taking a case. Determined to provide proof, Walter orders a camera. On his way home, he runs into Juan, who asks about the noise from his apartment. Walter lies, saying he's remodeling. Once home, he sets up the camera and goes to sleep. When he senses the entity, he jumps out of bed to check the footage and is horrified to see a deformed alien moving around his bedroom. The recording shows the creature hiding in a cupboard. Walter grabs his handgun and flings open the cupboard to confront it, but finds nothing. Fear grips him as he searches for the creature. He replays the video, and suddenly, the monster appears behind him and attacks, causing Walter to let out a horrifying scream. The next day, a boy runs to Walter's apartment for water and hears a chilling voice from the window warning him to flee. Terrified, he backs into the street and is hit by a bus. Meanwhile, Juan is at home painting over a crack from Walter when he hears the commotion outside. He rushes out and realizes the boy is Alicia's son. Heartbroken, he goes to inform Alicia of her son's tragic death. At the funeral, Clara comforts Alicia, promising support, while Juan anxiously glances at Walter's seemingly empty house. Then Jono receives a call from Police Chief Funes, who urgently asks him to come in for a serious case. Funes mentions someone will escort him. Meanwhile, Alicia, smoking a cigarette, hears a noise and finds dirty child-sized footprints at her door. Jono arrives at Funes' house to find a distraught Alicia covered in dirt. Funes explains they found her in this state while patrolling. Jono notices the officers appear frightened, and when they enter another room, he is shocked to see the decayed corpse of the boy sitting at the dining table. Funes reveals that the officers saw the corpse move, which he also witnessed. As Jono examines the body, Funes wonders if it might be a setup by the mother, but Jono points out scratches on the corpse's fingertips, suggesting it clawed its way out of the grave. They decide to search the mother's clothes for more clues and agree to keep this from the public to avoid complications, revealing that Alicia is Funes' ex. Just as they leave the room, they hear a loud crash. Jono examines the child's body and asks Funes if any photos were taken earlier. Funes, clearly anxious, insists on keeping the light on as they prepare to bury the child. Jono warns him not to mention the boy to anyone, fearing it could lead to his ex being committed. They plan to give Alicia sleeping medication so she won't notice when they take her son. Outside, a dazed Alicia insists they need to call a priest. Jono sees Dr. Albrecht outside Walter's house taking pictures and greets her, expressing admiration for her work. She explains she's been trying to contact Walter without success. Jono, unfamiliar with Walter, invites her to see the child instead. Funes panics at her photography, warning Jono that they might be in trouble if she continues. He's concerned about his clean record since he plans to resign soon for health reasons. Jono reassures him and reminds him to bring cement for the burial, advising him to keep his team away to avoid drawing attention. When Jono returns, Dr. Albrecht asks about the handprints on the wall. As they enter, she notices footprints and a rotten smell, soon discovering the body. Jono recounts an experience from his forensic days where a 20-year-old autopsy subject came back to life, initially dismissing it as stress. It happened again with an older man who had been dead for 2 days and spoke to him, suggesting such events occur when people meddle with the unknown. Their conversation continues, and Dr. Albrecht mentions she has his book, showing him photos from Walter and explaining her belief in strange paranormal activity. With the presence of the walking corpse, her suspicions seem confirmed. Meanwhile, a little boy climbs down the wall outside, steals some toys, and approaches the room where the child's body is, knocking on the glass door. The boy screams in fear, drops his bag, and runs away. Jono and Dr. Albrecht hear the noise and find the abandoned school bag near the body. They decide to hide the body in an outdoor freezer, thinking no one will believe the child, unaware he is recording the scene on his phone. The boy leaves with the footage while Jono places a planter on top of the freezer in case the body moves. Later, Funes returns and Jono tells him they've hidden the body. As they gather around the freezer, the body suddenly shifts. Dr. Albrecht urges Funes to cooperate to prevent further incidents and calls a colleague who specializes in paranormal activity. In the present, the trio speaks with Juan, explaining they need his signature to proceed, as his neighbors have already signed. Juan agrees to let them use his house for their investigation. They plan to examine 3 sites of reported paranormal activity. Dr. Albrecht will investigate Juan's home, Jono will check Alicia's house, and Funes will go with Dr. Rosenthal to Walter's deserted house. The team sets up their equipment and begins searching for signs of paranormal activity. Dr. Albrecht prepares her gear while Funes and Rosenthal find strange markings in Walter's bathroom using UV lights. Funes, visibly shaken, confides in Rosenthal about his fears, and Rosenthal tries to remain calm. Funes contacts Dr. Albrecht to explain they are in Walter's house, but have no electricity due to an unpaid bill, making it hard to see. She advises against restoring power, insisting the answers lie in the dark. Reluctantly, he agrees. Funes asks Rosenthal what they are searching for, and Rosenthal explains they need clues about that night. Noticing Funes' anxiety, he suggests Funes can leave if he feels scared. Funes mentions his health and hearing issues before moving to another room. Meanwhile, Jono gets a call from a woman asking for Alicia. He informs her that Alicia has gone to her sister's and gives her the number before she hangs up. Jono leaves his voicemails on speaker and goes to Alicia's son's bedroom, where he hears a voicemail from the boy's mother, who has seen the recording and wants to inform Alicia. Back at Walter's house, Funes and Rosenthal explore with a flashlight and find knives hanging from a cabinet. When Rosenthal pushes one, it unexpectedly pierces his skin. Startled by Rosenthal's scream, Funes rushes to help, but is stopped when Rosenthal feels something draining his blood into an entity inside the cabinet. In a panic, Funes draws his gun and aims at the cabinet, but when Rosenthal cautiously opens it, he finds it empty. Rosenthal tells Funes to lower his gun and helps bandage his wound. In the living room, Funes urgently calls Dr. Albrecht to report Rosenthal's injury, but Rosenthal insists they are close to the creature's lair and takes the phone. After hanging up, he tells Funes to clean up any blood, as it attracts the creature. As Funes cleans, he leaves some blood in the kitchen and calls Jono, expressing his inability to handle the situation due to his illness and stress. While they talk, Jono sees something in the neighboring house and asks Funes if he's at the window, but Funes is confused. Jono describes a figure that keeps vanishing, and suddenly the creature appears at his window, startling him. Funes tries to call back but loses the connection. Meanwhile, Dr. Albrecht examines a large crack in the wall. Funes decides he can't stay longer and tells Rosenthal, who claims to have found something. Despite being scared, Funes checks under a bedsheet but finds nothing. Rosenthal urges him to look from the other side, revealing strange feet peeking out from under the bed. Funes, terrified, watches a monstrous head appear and runs away in fear. Funes rushes to Alicia's house looking for Jono, but finds him missing. Hearing a noise from a large rack, he moves it aside to reveal a creature's head that cries for help. Back at Juan's house, Dr. Albrecht is still examining the crack when Funes bursts in, urgently saying Jono needs her help. He describes the chaos outside and pleads for assistance. Dr. Albrecht remains calm, advising him that not everything he saw is real and to pretend everything is fine. Funes, increasingly emotional, asks her for a plausible explanation for the creatures. She simply tells him to wash his hands, as the creature is attracted to blood. As she explains, a hand suddenly reaches out from the wall gap and takes her life. This becomes a breaking point for Funes as he witnesses horrifying events, leading to a life-threatening heart attack. The creature slithers out of a wall crack and follows him as he drags himself to another room. Just as he loads his gun, an enraged Alicia confronts him, accusing him of deceiving her. Funes pleads for her help, insisting his actions were for her benefit. Outside, he sees the child's body in a car and jumps into his vehicle.